Hello, people. This week I read The Tragedy of Liberation by Frank Decatur. This is about Mao, China, the revolution, this sort of energy. Now, I guess before we get too far in, I have to say, this is not a good book. It's 100% factual, right? He is a historian, he knows what he's doing. But it's not even that the subject matter is unpleasant, which it also is. History can be that sometimes. It's just the way he does it. So just know that going in. I'll get into why. I'll get into sort of what his issue is. That being said, it's history, so it can't help itself sometimes, but to be entertaining to me. There are things that are brought up in this that I didn't know because I've yet to do, any kind of a deep dive into your Chinese history. I have a few of the books. I'll start with the classics and I'll work my way up. But I haven't done it yet. So it's going to be interesting. One of the things I didn't realize is sort of how the steps went. All right, I knew Japan invaded China. I knew that went horribly bad for China. What I didn't know is they were sort of at odds internally before then. In Europe at that time, there was widespread vigor for new types of governing. And one of the new types was communism. And this kicked up in China too. It didn't go too deep into it. You get it sort of tangentially here in this book. But your communists and nationalists sort of team up against Japan. Then you win World War II. Now Japan is out. And they immediately then went back to fighting each other. So for the poor people of China, it was a horror show of war followed by a civil war, which was a horror show on its own. So really rough for them. And you can see how just these extremes can lead to extremes. But what was interesting to me is obviously Stalin, Moscow, was going to be promoting the communist side. He was funding them, he was giving them weaponry, this kind of an energy. But America, Truman and Marshall, General Marshall, weren't inclined to help as much. I think in sum total we gave $225 million total. And not all of that in guns, some of it in aid to help the nationalist side of China, who had helped us in World War II. Very wild. But your Truman's, what is this? Misunderstandings from leadership. And they weren't alone in these misunderstandings. I think on the whole, okay, so here's what would happen. Mao talked really well. So you would say things like, liberty, justice for all, I want peace, I want to work with the other side. It's just mainly this distribution of wealth energy that I have, right? He would talk that way, and I think Truman and Marshall, maybe a little bit, thought both sides wanted peace. When one side wants to eliminate the other is what was in actuality. So, as like anytime there'd be any chance of a peace, meaning the nationalist side, with some American help early on, would push deep into Mao. Your Truman and Marshall would say, slow down, stop, talk peace now. And of course, the losing side will talk peace, but Mao's constantly just regrouping on the backside. And as America left, the thing just went to crap. What they didn't understand about Mao is he was willing to win at all costs, and he wanted not to win what was there. So, like an Alexander the Great will, I guess, invade Egypt. He wants Cairo. Is it Cairo? Or Babylon. He wants Babylon, the city. You're right. They want the actual town that's there. When the Crusaders are going versus the Arabs, they both want the holy city. Mao was fine with every old structure basically burning to the ground. He didn't care what was broken. And from his point of view, the more broke things got, the better they were for him. Because he was leading young people, young, uneducated, fervent people, and he stoked them into a bloodbath and let the blood flow. And we're talking full on. We're talking even in some rural areas when Japan was, what do we say? Not invaded. When Japan controlled Manchuria, they were fixing up roads, just basic logistics. Plumbing maybe was a little better. Any of those benefits, any benefits that may have come from previous Chinese rulers, break. We're breaking bridges. We're sieging entire towns and full on starving the people out. Like medieval levels of not good here. Death. Unrelenting. And this is sort of the problem, I think, subtly that happens in the Civil War. Now, again, he's not harping on this in the book, on what I'm bringing up, which is the conflict itself. The challenge between the commander of the nationalists and Mao and their thinking. He's not bringing this up. I'm seeing it, which is the fun of history. You can see things in there. The nationalists kept wanting the old. So here's this old great city of Hong Kong or Chengdu or whatever the city is. What does they say? Changchun. They want the old city, and so they run to it and try and hold it. He doesn't care about it. He wants to wipe you out. So he doesn't mind how bad it gets broken in the process of taking it from you. And that's exactly what he does. He breaks it horribly. And I'm talking functional breaks, so that the city cannot function for the benefit of the people in it after he's done, in a lot of senses. If you compare this to, what is it? When the Arabs invaded Spain and sort of took it over. They owned that crap for like 400 years. But there were some mountains in the north, and they could never get the Spaniards out of there, and they persisted until 400 some odd years later, they rally the people and roast them out. And since then to now, they have a yearly anniversary of the Reconquista, right? When they retook over everything, they still celebrate it now. They had never gave up all of their land, but they had to live in sort of extreme environments. If the nationalists had done this, if the nationalists had picked maybe Tibet, maybe Western China, somewhere in the countryside, mountains preferably. If you'd have picked there and sent all of your troops there, everything you have there, then I think they could have held out and eventually won out. But they didn't. Some of them surrendered. A lot of them went to Taiwan, which is, why they might still have issues with China now, etc., etc. But the aftermath of them not winning is, horrible for the country of China. There's no way around this. It was a horrible situation. So what Mao would do, Mao was He liked this idea of the underclass versus the upper class. And he would go into a poor village or send his people into a poor village. And for as long as it took, weeks or months or month after month, they would just have meetings and talk and drill into people. Your life sucks for any reason that it sucks because rich landlords. And the funny part here, I say funny, not so funny, is that China didn't have a landlord class. They did not have landlords in the sense that Europe may have had it. They didn't have serfdom. They had probably 1,000 years worth of just buying and selling land. A majority of the farmers owned the farm they were working. They didn't have the government as it was, the magistrates would enforce the contracts written. If it said you get the topsoil here but he gets the rocks underneath, we're going to enforce that because he has the paperwork. And it didn't matter, of course, who you're talking about. Internal of anything, there's going to be corruptions, etc. But on the whole, this is how the structure worked. Which is fascinating. Of course, if you're uneducated and you've been through about 12 years of constant war or more, everything sucks and you don't know what's going on, and they just drill this into you. Maybe you accept it. That's what they did. They'd accept it. Then he would basically make a mob, just a stoked out of its mind mob, who would then grab the rich, because this is what they did. They went into town and categorized everyone from the richest to the poorest. About 3 levels each, or 4 levels, whatever the color, number, rank, whatever it was. The poorer you are, the better they were going to treat you. The richer, the worse they were going to treat you. And the crowd would just run rampant. They would grab up a guy who was richer in town than them, and they'd say he's a landlord. And they would put him on trial. And it was not a real trial, not a real jury. It's just a mob yelling at you. And if you're lucky, you just got beat up. But a lot of them weren't lucky. And as the sort of fire of this spread, because after you do it in one town, you go to another, and you go to another, you would get to where you'd grab a good percentage of the rich people in town, rich being not that rich, beat them, usually kill them, then everyone in town takes their stuff. Whatever stuff you end up with. And some of them, stay in that town, and the Maoist head on to the next. And it's just a fire burning throughout your country. And he's doing this, and of course, as he grows and after he's won, he does this on just the biggest scale you could imagine. Every government office, every factory needs to comply. Everyone's ranked in terms of where they sit in these categories. And his failsafe, when things get too rough, when someone's too close or he's getting boxed in, he just sends a mob in and they just kill you. They just call you rich. They'll call you a capitalist. They call you a landlord, whatever the term, a rightist, whatever the term is of the day. They just call you that and kill you. And of course that cows everyone else down because you don't want to be dead. And you think if I just lay low, it'll blow over. But it doesn't blow over. It just keeps burning and burning. Now, some of the problem here is when you kill all the upper educated people, obviously, now you don't have people who can tell you how some of these industries function. Some towns were run completely on the making of paper. Don't know how to do it. That's over. Everyone in town now doesn't have a job. Well, it doesn't matter because he's conscripting grain from the rich. I'm like, that's nice. And you're handing out grain, and he's especially feeding himself and his army. But what happens when you need to grow more? Well, we have the new peasants with their new farms. Problem. the sort of the structure of economy, right? Everything's not grown, not now, not then. Everything you eat isn't grown on just massive industrial farms. Some sci-fi crap. We're not there yet. From 1,000 years of China to whatever many years to now, 250 years of America, we're not there yet. We don't have big buildings that just churn out food. It's not how it works. You will have some large farms. You will have some rich farmers. But the majority, and I'm talking probably 80% of your food, maybe it's 70, is just a mass collection of small farmers. From where I am in Texas, I can drive from one town to the next and probably see 30 different ranchers. And they're not huge. I'm talking 10 acres, 12 acres, 5 acres. Some might have 4 cows. Some might have 40. 20 here, 20 there. I mean, just on the side of the road, dotted here and there. Everywhere. Goats, chickens. All of that is just constant production that when it's pooled together, you see this great abundance. So that's all that Mao saw, is the abundance. Oh, it's all just right there. But in actuality, that's not how it goes. In actuality, in China at the time, you would be, let's say, a farmer, and you own your 3 acres of land. Well, depending on the land, the region, the weather, you may grow one crop a year. Maybe when it's spring, you plant cherries or whatever it is you plant. You plant some onions or some mess. Those grow, you sell them, and the rest of the year, you're basket weaving or making wooden shoes or any number of things like this. You're just a painter. You're a craftsman of some kind. That's the bulk of them would do. So when he's killing some of them off or stealing from them, you didn't have the apparatus to replace what they did, because they weren't just making carrots. You lost shoemakers, farmers, and handymen that would fix factories or work in you lost like 7 things at once. This is what Mao did. And, well, how bad could it be? Well, how bad it was, millions of people starving to death. And I'm talking numbers higher than the totals of World War I and II, probably. Yeah, I think so. Just, there's no food. He would, because you'd go to this rural area, and everyone now owns an equal portion of land, right? Good. Now farming. He's like, I need tools. We didn't have enough tools for everyone to own an equal portion of land, because only half of them were farmers. Other half were, day laborers. I show up on your farm, I work it for a while, then I leave and I go do this. I go sailing. I work in a factory. I do like 9 different things throughout the year. I don't care. Well, now he has a farm, and instead of needing the 1 spade, I need 6 spades. There's not 6 spades. There's not enough mules. There's not enough cows to actually move the plow. There's not enough plows. Well, what did he decide? Let me force collectivism. We'll all share everything. Okay? 1, some of them doesn't know how to properly use the item, and they didn't pay for it. They didn't put any effort into getting it, so they don't treat it like it's theirs. And or they don't know not to use it in this fashion. Things start to break. On top of that, you would have people, again, because it's not theirs, they think it's a tool. They understand they're going to be hungry at some point. They're overworking the animals. Some of the animals just come back unfed. Some of them just die. Now they have even less. This is how bad it was getting. They were mad at pregnant women for eating more than the share that they worked. And it sounds nuts. It sounds nuts, but you have to remember, they didn't get this land through normal means. They got it through violence. And that's a social, mental line. It's like a wall. That once you break the wall, it's hard to get everyone back into civilized behavior. Not that they don't know what's wrong. It's just the rules for, I guess, what inhibits people seems to just disappear. In America, I believe after the Revolutionary War, I want to say after the Revolutionary War. No, I think it was after the Civil War. You had cats in Kentucky who just fought a civil war. That is, we had a disagreement, and the solution to the disagreement was violence. One side lost, one side won. We move on. There's a dude in Kentucky, I say dude, it was probably a bunch of dudes, who wanted to make whiskey and didn't want to pay no whiskey tax, I believe. And we had a full-on whiskey rebellion. These guys got guns, said, well, you're going to come make me not do the thing you say I shouldn't do. And that's what the American government did. Wasn't that hard. But it's just, it shows you how once this tool is established, there's no reason it shouldn't not be used. And that's how I think you end up with people yelling at a pregnant lady because she's eating too much. It's a wild concept, but you got to remember, you don't start from civilization and jump to barbarism. You whittle your way down. You break through this wall. Then you're on the other side, and then everything looks a lot different. So they weren't in a mode mentally to help each other. You also have to think of the scope of the problem, because you would think, like, you can't just keep killing people, because this is what they also do. So, over here they're starving in the country, and in the city, any aberrant thought could be punishable by death, essentially. If you're lucky, I guess, you got sent to a gulag and hard labor for 20 years, and then you would die. But Mao was also using it to sort of thin out people. I swear he said this at one point. He said, X amount of executions a day will equal this many people gone, ergo that much less food we need to consume. But this is actual real thinking that was sort of held. And they started executing people in town. So if let's say I run a bank, this cadre, this communist, this official from Mao would come into the bank and say, explain to me banking. And I start trying to explain to him interest rates and bonds, etc., financial services, and he doesn't know what I'm talking about. He might think I'm insulting him, take it sideways, and just sort of order me to the gulag. And in the gulag, it's beatings, maltreatment, debate. They like to debate, which is just yell at you essentially that you're wrong. No matter what you'd say, they're going to keep cycling people in. You don't get to eat, you don't get to sleep, you don't get to see the sunlight. They just cycle people in until eventually you say, yeah, I'm wrong. Then they make you write down your confession of your wrongs. Then obviously later they use those confessions against you. This is what we're doing. If not just outright killing. So the people in the cities are dying at the same time the people in the countries are dying. At the same time, Mao's walking around, sort of projecting. What I mean by this is he'd invite journalists from other countries to come in, and he would have whole, essentially, facade areas. Here's Hong Kong. It's still nice. And I guess his enemies, he'd leave in this house. Like, let's say, I'm going to leave him in this house, my former enemy. That guy knows. Doesn't have to be said. Maybe it's whispered to him. Doesn't have to be said. But if Mao doesn't like what I say, he kills me and he kills my family. So I'm sitting in this house. I'm fed. A reporter comes. He asks me great things. How's Mao? What am I going to say? I'm going to say nothing but great things about Mao. I'm going to say how well my life runs. The reporters then just awed by the fact that this man only has to worry about his plants. That's how high the communist society in China has gotten. That the leisure time is this man's entire life. And everywhere he walks in town, people seem nice and happy. Because they are nice and happy. Because they're eating all the grain that's coming from the country. Where everyone's starving to death. And they get to float in town. And they get to project to the world that everything's fine in China. While at the same time, he's killing bankers. He is full on. The levels of death is just unreal. And these descriptions of death is why I say this is such a bad book. Not in a description of death. That's history. That happened. I'm fine. I'm not fine with death. I'm fine him describing it. But there's a way you can do it. So, the part about the countryside. So the countryside starts to deteriorate. And people die in the process. People die in these sham trials. They die starving to death. They die by government officials, etc., etc. He will almost go, feels like, it's not, but he'll pick a street, he'll pick a house, he'll pick a family, and he'll just bounce through. The same process will repeat in the city, and he'll go through it. The same process will repeat in some other function of government in some other time. Same process. It's the same process happening everywhere at the same time. But the repetitiveness of it, it's like, I get it. I get that horror show of people dying. I understand these trials are rigged. Every time you start and start from the beginning of that story to say, they thought this, I know how it's going to go because you just showed me 19 examples that it's going to go. Confess, you're going to be okay, hard labor, death, or, don't confess and death, or starvation, or we think it's good and then it goes bad. It's just, it's too much. It's probably 60% of the book is just descriptions of horrible ways people die, but in a repetitive manner. So, if I give you the battle of, if I'm talking World War I, and in it I describe the Battle of Verdun, that may be intense. But then I say, this battle essentially repeated itself, here and here and here and here and here. The reader understands that level of death is now spread. There's nothing inherently different from this trench to that trench. Verdun gave you the whole. You could do the same with this. You could give me an area wherein sort of an example of all the bad things happened to this area, and then I can extrapolate out. You use other examples to show me, like the size of a stadium, the population of Delaware. You do these kind of things periodically afterwards to keep reminding me that death is going on at an ungodly level. But he doesn't. And this is the root problem of this book. This is why it's not good. The rest are cool facts and they lead you down interesting thoughts. But this is the root problem of the book. We then get to the Korean War, which Mao was still alive for, which I had no idea. MacArthur. Your boy MacArthur goes past the old 38th parallel. And that seems to trigger Mao. And Mao sends a flood of troops. Now, from America's perspective, from a cursory look at the situation, it's just China invading. What he did is a lot of the people who had surrendered during the Civil War, he just chucked them to the front and said, if you stay here, I'll kill you. Run and kill them. It's your only hope. And so now what follows is a horror show of war. And some of these, again, because they're not his troops, he could care less about them. They just run rampant in there and it's just going headfirst at machine guns. But it doesn't stop there, because why would it? He sent them with, I think some of them would have, and not just them, not just the ones that are not his army, his people, his Chinese people. He just sent them into the front with regular clothes, just cotton shirt, cotton shoes, sometimes no shoes. Now it's minus 30 sometimes in this part of Korea. It's horrendous winds that are coming. There's not enough food. There's not enough warmth. They said, and admittedly, some of them said, when the Americans retreated, if they hadn't left that stuff, we would have died. The trucks, I guess the gas, they'd start a fire, the sleeping bags, the clothes, that was saving their lives. And Mao simply just didn't care. He's just going to keep grinding up in there. What do they say? Starvation amongst his own troops, night blindness from malnutrition, dysentery. All were just running rampant. He just kept sending them. He then also sent them past whatever, the 38th parallel. He sent them down too far. So the supply lines were even more stretched, etc., etc. And that's where he started to lose. But what MacArthur going that far did, is it re-entrenched Mao. Because he could walk around and say, I pushed the American army back. I was winning. We can beat the American army. Also, he could then say, for propaganda reasons, America's your enemy. I'm your only hope. You stay with me or they'll eat you alive. And I guess if you're alive, that seems good. And in town, that seems good. And it keeps the army under control. And everyone else in the country is just struggling to survive. Which is part of why he could, I guess, get away with it. You would think killing millions of people would get you mobs coming after to kill you. And it, in theory, should. But if you look at government as a human invention, we have used it long enough now that it's making problems that only it can solve. So, if your government goes haywire, you as an individual can't kill one other individual to fix it. It becomes an apparatus. People are living off of the bad side of it, and it's killing the other ones. So you need sort of a form of government to take out the bad form of government. But how do you do that when you're just struggling not to starve to death? This is the problem. This is the reality of these people in China. Half of them just trying to get by. The other half are terrified they're going to get got. And then the rest of them are happy in their comfortable positions or terrified of getting knocked off their comfortable positions. In any case, not any of them are there to help the overall cause. And it just ate itself up. It just ate these people up in this atrocious way. Now the war, okay, because MacArthur's an idiot, then MacArthur's pushed back, and then MacArthur's ousted, and Truman sends another guy because he's like, you're an idiot. That guy's clearly like, you know what, let's get peace as quick as possible. Mao then says, because the conflict's helping his cause internally, he doesn't care if they die or not. Mao then says, I need all my prisoners of war back. We turn to our prisoners of war. These are Chinese people we've captured. And they're like, how about don't send me back? Is there any way I can stay in this jail? They would tattoo anti-Mao things on themselves to say, look, if he sees this, I'm dead, so I need asylum. Real life. That's how bad China was, that you'd rather stay a prisoner of war than return. And so they're like, well, half of them don't want to go. And Mao's like, you're lying. They love me. I'm not going to sign this surrender until you give them back to me. And he was going to use this to stretch the war out. I think he stretched it out another 2 years after it stalemated. 2 years of just, again, a horror show of a meat grinder. And the meat being human beings. Just an absolute horror show. Stalin dies. And then he quickly signs an armistice. And to me, that's telling. Because you're sitting there, and at this point in the book, I'm thinking, like, not how, but like, why? Why is this person just this heartless? And sort of what I see on the grand scale is all he did, all communism did, was swap. It put the people on top, the rich, and it chucked them down to be peasants, and it made the peasants the new aristocrats. Problem is, they don't have generations of being an aristocrat. And you're like, well, that's just, who cares if they're not been rich? It's not just being rich. It's the ups and downs of that environment. So if I'm in charge of the railroads, that's one thing. If I'm from like 7 generations of family who's been in charge of the railroads, completely different. His dad taught his son, etc., down to me. There's lessons learned through that aristocrat class that got them to that 1,000-year mark, that now this new aristocrat, the new communist cadres, are having to relearn. Part of it is, whatever they're learning. Can't treat people this way. Here's the long-term negatives. Here's what would oust you from your seat. All these things, all the back channeling, all the pettiness. We've been through this before, we being humanity. We've been through it. And they just chose to restart at the beginning because these people don't know and won't know because they don't read. They're just going to relive it. That's what's happening. That's what was started to happen. And so now you have a Mao who grew up poor, I believe. And he's now top of the heap. And what you see from him is paranoia. You see, like, if he doesn't know something, he won't tell you he doesn't know it. He'll just act like he does. And then later act like you're trying to, because he took it sideways. You're looking down at me because I don't know economics. I'm like, you didn't tell anyone you didn't know. He then will like get that person ousted or sent to a gulag or something dumb like this. And what it is I don't think he ever got over the fact inside himself that he's not the thing that he's saying he is, right? Like imposter syndrome. I'm not actually of an aristocrat elite class to rule this country. I don't deserve this kind of energy. And it just projected out this just horrible way. And because he's never been king, he doesn't understand. Proclamations go from on high down to on low and just cause repercussions along the way. I think that was his issue. He just never got over the fact that he was poor at once in his life. It's one of those, like, you're not fat, but what you see in the mirror is what's motivating you or sending you down a wrong road. This kind of energy, that's what I get out of this. It ends around 1956. I believe by then, I don't know if Stalin dies by then. He actually lives a long freaking time. By then, Stalin's dead. Mao, I think, is still alive. If I said Stalin, I meant Mao. Mao's still alive, I believe. And Nikita Khrushchev comes out and gives this sort of like speech. And in it, he's saying stuff that's just anti-communism, which doesn't sound bad, but internal to the brainwashed environment that is a communist country, any negative anyone says is, whoa. So the fact that it's coming from the source, which would be Moscow, because to them Moscow's higher, because that's how Mao put them. Because Mao has this inferiority complex, and Stalin projected aura like no one's business. He has Moscow as like the be-all, end-all. So that when these Chinese people hear this negative about communism, they think the whole thing's about to crumble. And you have almost a mini revolution. You have almost an uprising. He cracks down on it like nobody's business. Bodies get dropped again. But to me, that's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is how unsold they were on it. It's one of these. It's the fire needs just a spark. That's what it feels like, and I think that's why year-old Tiananmen Square in '89, I think, is such a big deal. It's just there's a facade around China, but what's bubbling underneath is a lot harder to see, especially since your Chinese government's trying not to see it. And it's interesting to see a clue to that here, because no real major thing happened other than just one speech, and it almost upended itself. Almost the communism would have fallen in '56, but of course Mao clammed down on it real good. And that's how it ends, sort of on the one last crackdown. It was wild. We're talking one lady complimented nail polish, end up in a gulag. One lady was too good in college, and I'm talking like not boasting, just I got done early because I know this subject, gulag. If you were in a kitchen too good at your job, gulag, because the officials are like, I need X amount numbers, I need a quota to fill. From on high, from Mao, who thinks these quotas are a good thing. This is how you could function. It's madness, and that's this book. It's part of a trilogy. So this doesn't cover the Great Leap Forward or the Great Famine. I don't plan on reading those from this author. Again, just in the way he is setting things out. It's a real Debbie Downer, if you know what I mean. But yes, the killing is horrible. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the pace of the book, right? The way it flows is unappealing if you're a reader. That's really the main point I want to get across on the book side itself. The internals and the subject matter, cannot question this guy. I firmly believe he's in 100% control of the facts. He knows what's going on. I bet all of this is provable. What a wild time in China. And that's the tragedy of liberation. Literally a tragedy. What's not a tragedy is these ads. Here, what you see before you are my books. My books are not filled with constant death and destruction. I think they're very enjoyable. I also know you can buy them, and then I will get your money. Or you can get Kindle Unlimited and read them there whilst also reading other things. You'll get the enjoyment of the book. I'll get a little Spotify-esque money. I think that's pretty sure that's how Kindle Unlimited works. It's like Spotify for books. And then you'll get value if my book sucks, because you can read other books that are good and in so not lose out on any money, which I think is fantastic. Either way is fine by me. Okay. I will see you lovely lot next week.